I started to see how cancer was an opportunity for me to learn so much about myself, including being stuck in a room after my surgeries and not being able to go out
Yeah.
and be stressed about the daily things in my life, right? Like, what were my children doing? Was the chicken being cleaned up on the counter? Like all these tiny things that would have set me into a pattern of anxious storytelling within myself of the way things should be, about how other people should be acting, all of those things that I was trying to control so I would feel safe and comfortable. When I was stuck in a room because I had no choice, things became very peaceful. And I realized that life was just going on without me outside of my room. And when I didn't have this monitoring awareness of everyone else's behavior, I was free from my own judgments of what everyone else was doing.
Welcome back to Relatable Wisdom, the podcast where everyday people share the quotes that illuminate their journey, inviting us all to reflect and grow together. Today we're joined by Morgan Bosilkov, a spiritual coach and artist based in Atlanta. Morgan has a unique gift for connecting people to the love and beauty that exists both within and around us. With her raw vulnerability and deep insights, she guides others on their paths of healing and self-discovery. Let's open our hearts and mind as we dive into Morgan's world and explore the wisdom that has touched her life. Tell us your name and okay, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what you feed in the form. All is love. Everything is happening for us rather than to us. Yeah. I mean it's your favorite, so
Consistent.
it's everything is consistent. Okay. Okay. Tell us your name and what your favorite quote or lesson is.
My name is Morgan Bosilkov, and I have come to learn that everything is happening for us rather than to us. And it stems from a basic understanding that all is love.
Ooh, all is love. Everything is happening for us rather than to us. Everything, all the words there are simple words. I understand it. But combined together, I need you to make it make sense for me. What does it mean for something to happen for you rather than to you? Is there a difference?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I spent most of my life in survival mode, believing that everything was happening to me. I would go for walks with friends, and I would spend most of my time complaining about my life and making a list of all of the ways that life was happening to me and how I was suffering. And I was looking for external validation because I wasn't validating myself and my own experience. So essentially, I had internalized a method of gaslighting myself and invalidating myself. That was a survival skill from my childhood, but it wasn't working for me anymore. And as I went through my transformational life experience through my early 40s, I began to realize that life was happening for me so I could learn more about myself in a way that got me in touch with my heart and took me out of my head. So all of those thoughts and stories and victimhood attachments that I had, I started to let them go a little at a time. And through plant medicine, through mushrooms and ayahuasca, and then integration of the lessons that I learned from those and my life experiences, I realized that life was teaching me about my own shadows and my light. And the more I could embrace life's lessons as happening for me to serve me and my evolution, the more I could release control and surrender to the process of Earth School.
School of life.
um, yeah, the school of life. Rather than feeling like a victim of life, it became a school of
Yeah.
life.
Now, could you give us an example of of when you were a victim and how you walk and give us an example of life happening and how you approached it as a victim, and you could also give us an example of life happening and how you approached it as a victim.
Yes. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is when I had cancer. And I didn't realize it at the time because I was so wrapped up in surviving. before I even had cancer, I was in a survival mode. But after I got through cancer, and it really became just another thing on that list that I mentioned of all the things that had happened to me. And then as I went through my transformative evolution and I started to awaken to a new perspective of life as happening for me, I started to see how cancer was an opportunity for me to learn so much about myself, including being stuck in a room after my surgeries and not being able to go
Yeah.
out and be stressed about the daily things in my life, right? Like, what were my children doing? Was the chicken being cleaned up on the counter? Like all these tiny things that would have set me into a pattern of anxious storytelling within myself of the way things should be, about how other people should be acting, all of those things that I was trying to control so I would feel safe and comfortable. When I was stuck in a room because I had no choice, things became very peaceful. And I realized that life was just going on without me outside of my room. And when I didn't have this monitoring awareness of everyone else's behavior, I was free from my own judgments of what everyone else was doing. I could just be and let go because I had no choice. But there was a sense of like realizing that that was what I was experiencing. Like, why was I more peaceful alone in my room? Um, and because I had no control, it was like a forced realization that the universe blessed me with that I didn't realize was a blessing at the time. But now I can remember that moment and say, okay, Morgan, do I really need to get wrapped up in worrying about these tiny details about life? Or can I say, you know what? If I were stuck in bed again after surgeries, would I be worrying about any of these things? No. And that's so freeing. So now, I can really take that experience and see how it was showing me how to detach from my attachment to my body, right? So the parts of my body that were part of my identity and what I considered an essential part of me being me, I had to let go of some of those parts of my body as I went through the cancer process. And so that was a lesson in detaching from the story of what makes me me,
Yeah.
right? There's a all of the ways, with Buddhism, it teaches that non-attachment. Well, cancer is certainly a way to start loosening our grip on our body. Aging does the same thing. There's so many ways that we can realize that we are not this body. We are not our roles. We are not our job. We are not all of the things that we label as ourselves. So cancer was a really beautiful way of experiencing that. I hope that I hope that I'm learning my lessons more easily and quickly now, and the universe doesn't have to push me into really big lessons like that. But I also realize that I'm just here to surrender to what comes my
How,
way and ride the
how long
waves.
ago was that?
6 years.
Oh, that's, you know, I recently I was having a conversation with a guest and I was like, sometimes, usually it takes a near-death experience to realize how to live. But the thing is, not everybody's lucky. Not
That's right.
everybody's lucky because usually most persons, when the near-death experience happens, they're dead and that's it. But sometimes, it's that point where you're like, I'm about to die, and you're like, if I get the second chance, I'm gonna. This is what I will. This is what I do. I don't care about this. And you see, everything becomes it becomes clear and open, and then you realize that, oh, this stuff is not important to me. Why was I chasing all this stuff all along? And I mean, if you've gotten it in the past and it's nice, but we shouldn't wait for that experience because not every time we get to say, oh yeah, I had this, and yeah.
Yes, I love that. It's a beautiful reflection. Thank you.
I mean,
Yes, I think the universe whispers and then it starts speaking. And then eventually it will yell at us until, you know, I say, I'm writing a book, and in one of the chapters, I talk about surrender by choice because so many times in my life, I've ended up on my knees asking for help. But I've gotten there because the universe was screaming at me, and it's almost like I had no choice but to surrender and ask for help. But how can we instead just go ahead and do the surrendering before we're on our knees, right?
Yeah,
Before we feel like we have no choice but to ask for help. Let me just surrender every day.
yeah, yeah. All is love. Everything is happening for us
All
rather
is
than
love.
to us. Everything is happening for us rather than to us. I mean,
Yes.
terrible things do happen in life. So we're not just going to sit down here and say,
Yes.
oh, there are things that, how do I explain this now? There are things that they happen. They're so terrible that if you happen to know the person that it happened to, you show up at the place and you don't even know the consoling words to say. You
Yeah.
just, you can't even say anything. And at that point in time, how do I? I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny. How do I how do I tell them that everything is happening for us?
That's really hard.
Like
Yes.
like
Uh-huh.
help me.
I think in those moments, it's about showing up to hold space for someone else. Um, because when we're in survival mode, it goes back to that validation, right? Like fully experiencing whatever is happening without stuffing it down or numbing it, or avoiding it. And when someone else is there for us, when we're going through something that requires that survival mode, just someone holding space and seeing what we're going through and validating our experiences is so powerful. Because then it gives us permission to validate what we're going through and say, this is hard. This is really, really, really hard. This feels impossible. I don't know if I can handle this. And having someone around us saying, I see you, and this is hard, and your feelings are valid, and just holding that loving space, is sometimes all we can do, and it's exactly what someone might need. And it's such a blessing because so often we don't hold that space for ourselves, you know? So no matter what someone is going for, having someone else shine acceptance and love and support, um, when we can't necessarily give that to ourselves is a beautiful, beautiful gift.
Yeah. Now I'm going to nudge a bit, right? I'm gonna ask for more, like Oliver asked for more. Other than the cancer story, have there been other
Yeah,
instances or of stories you could share to help us illustrate and make sense of this quote from your life, of course?
sure. So I have a long history of having narcissistic energy in people who were close to me. And um, I was never standing up for myself or using my voice or taking action when my body wanted me to protect myself. So, whether it was in a job or a romantic relationship or something where my whole body was saying this isn't okay, but my mind would tell me, no, you have to people please, or you have to just run
Oh,
away
people
or be
say,
quiet or whatever it was to avoid the
yeah,
feelings. I had a situation where I had hired someone to help me with something, and the universe is like, here's that energy again. And I became afraid. And I found myself going back into old patterns of survival mode. I wanted to run away from the situation. I wanted to ask someone else to help me speak up to this person. But I had to really sit with myself and say, okay, how can I handle this differently? What is this teaching me about myself? And so by looking at my own reaction to this person that I had hired who was trying to kind of like ask me for way more money than they originally said it was going to
yeah,
be for, and all of these things. And I felt I felt angry, I felt frustrated, I felt scared, I felt all of these things. So I allowed myself to feel the things. And then I realized, wait, what if I do this differently than I've done in the past? But I had to go through the emotions before I could come to a neutral place. And then I was able to look at it as a lesson instead of as this fearful experience that I was trying to avoid. And I sat down, I wrote something out, I approached the person myself, and I just used it as an opportunity, like a way to practice um, approaching a challenge like this in a different way. And it worked out. And I was so surprised. And I was like, wow, okay. And it gave me this courage to do it in the future, but it also felt very healing to address an old pattern with a very familiar energy type, an archetype in another person in a way that felt empowered. I used my voice. I listened to my body. I validated my experience. I believed myself instead of um, reacting. I responded with a conscious choice. And to me, I feel like I can look back on it and say, well, what did I learn that time? Not only did I learn how to react differently and respond differently, but moving forward, if I have another pattern like that come up, I can recognize it and say, okay, well, what did I learn from that last time? Maybe I don't even have to go through the process of trying to outsource before I realize I can handle it myself. Maybe next time I can just handle it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just listening to the story. I nearly forgot that I was the host. Yeah, I was like,
You're
right.
so
No, I was
sweet.
like, I was just listening. I was like, yeah, yeah, okay, okay, go on, go on, go on. I was like, I'm supposed to be the one moderating the conversation. My bad, my bad. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for giving that, for sharing that story and for helping us make sense of all this love, everything is happening for us rather than to us. Now, I want us to quickly, for those that are listening right now, help them make sense of this quote. Now, what would you say, maybe from your own life, and then maybe having seen other persons too? What are some of the tendencies you notice people who approach life like life is happening to them?
Well, when we are in a victim mindset, and I want you to know that I would have pushed back on what I'm about to say and what I've been saying 5 years ago. I would have clung to my list of things that happened to me, like my life depended on it, because at the time, my ego was so attached to it because I was looking for the external validation
Yeah,
of what I had experienced. So now what I see is um, so many of our stories are attached to judgment. And I don't know if you're familiar with Byron Katie, but she has this beautiful process called Judge Your Neighbor. And many of the ways that we separate ourselves from others and the way we separate ourselves from our own beauty and authenticity is to judge. So judgment creates that separation. And separation um, is not remembering our oneness and our connection and the love that we all are. So the more we can work on our judgments, the more connected we can feel, the more compassionate we can feel towards ourselves and others, the more we can see our humanity in others. Because so oftentimes the way that we're judging other people um, is the way that we judge ourselves. And life keeps mirroring ourselves back at us. So if I'm driving and someone cuts me off, right, an old behavior might be to get really angry and judge them and say they're rude, they're inconsiderate, how could they? All of these things that we come up with. But if we stop and we get into a pattern of saying, I'm judging. Okay, that's the first step is to even notice we're judging. And then we say, oh, when have I done that? When have I cut someone off? And maybe we never have, but then we can look at the character trait that we're assigning to this person. Maybe it's rude or inconsiderate. And we can ask ourselves, have I been rude or inconsiderate? And it's like, well, Yes, we can almost all find a time when we have acted out of fear and not been our best selves because we're always doing our best. And everybody feels justified in what they do at all times. So whoever cut you off, I'm sure they have a really good reason. So if we take that opportunity to notice our judgment and then think about how we have perhaps acted in a similar way out of some fear-based state, because if it's not love, then it's fear, then we can feel more compassion for that person. We can say, you know what? I remember when I did something like that, and I was actually really late to something, and I was afraid of not getting to my job interview on time, or whatever it might be. And then you can say, maybe my story is less about how terrible that other person is, and more realizing that they're doing their best right now. And it's okay. And let me just focus on how I'm showing up in this world. When am I being rude and inconsiderate? When am I acting out of fear? Or whatever the thing might be, right? Like even judging someone for talking about someone else. It's like, well, I'm talking about them in my head right now. So let me focus on my own energy. But Byron Katie has some really great worksheets, and it can take us out of that story of judging others and separating ourselves and more into a space of compassion and love and connection. And most importantly, our own awareness of ourselves and how we show up in the world, because that's all we have control of.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for sharing your favorite quote, lesson realization with us today. And thank you so much for, sharing the stories. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I love that you held such beautiful space.
It's been really, really great chatting with you. Where can listeners learn more about you and what you do?
Thank you. I have a website. It's morganbstudio.com.
Okay, morganbstudio.com. Okay. What do you do? Just so
I'm a spiritual coach and an artist. So you can find my art, my podcast, my blogs, and links to me as a coach or whatever resonates most with the listener.
Yeah.
Well, you are fabulous.
Well,
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to Relatable Wisdom. If you found something meaningful in this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. Every little bit keeps the conversations going. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep growing.